my father looked at me across that room and gave me a choice that no father should ever give his daughter. He said, "Deny this man you are calling Jesus, or you are no longer my daughter." I want you to understand what that room was. It was not just a room in a house. It was a room filled with some of the most powerful Islamic scholars and elders in Saudi Arabia, men who have shaped Islamic theology and policy across the Muslim world, men whose opinions move governments, men who had been summoned specifically because of me, because a 24-year-old princess from one of the most prominent Islamic families in the kingdom had apparently lost her mind and needed to be corrected before the embarrassment spread further than it already had. My father sat at the head of the gathering, a man I have loved and feared in equal measure my entire life, a man who has funded the construction of mosques across 3 continents, a man whose name is spoken with reverence in Islamic circles from Riyadh to Jakarta to London, a man who has given his life to the spread and protection of Islam, and who was now looking at his youngest daughter across a room full of witnesses and asking her to do one simple thing: deny Jesus. The room was completely silent. Everyone was looking at me. I could feel the weight of their collective expectation. Not hostile exactly, not yet, but absolute. The absolute expectation of people who have never seriously considered the possibility that what they are asking for might not be given. I sat in that silence for what felt like a very long time, and then something happened inside me that I cannot explain in natural terms. Because I was afraid. I want to be completely honest with you. I was terrified. I am 24 years old, and I was sitting in front of my father and the most powerful religious men in my world, and I knew what the consequences of the wrong answer were. I was afraid in every part of my body, but underneath the fear, deeper than the fear, in a place that the fear could not reach, was something else entirely. Peace. The same peace that had been living in me since the 4th night, the peace that none of the luxury of my previous life had ever been able to produce, the peace that had arrived with his presence and had not left since. It was there underneath the terror of that room, steady and unshakable and completely independent of my circumstances. Like a foundation that holds regardless of what the weather is doing above it. I opened my mouth and I told them the truth. My name is Noor. I am 24 years old. I am, or I was, depending on how you count these things, a princess of the Al-Shadi family of Saudi Arabia. I will not give you more identifying detail than that because there are people whose safety is connected to mine and I will not compromise them. What I will tell you is that my family is exactly what you are imagining when you hear the words Saudi princess. The wealth, the influence, the private aircraft, the palaces, the staff, the complete insulation from the ordinary material difficulties that shape most human lives. I grew up wanting for nothing that money could provide, and I grew up inside Islam the way a fish grows up inside water, not choosing it, not questioning it, simply being inside it as the total environment of existence. My family does not practice Islam casually. My family funds Islam. My father has built mosques. My brothers have endowed Islamic universities. My family name appears on the walls of Islamic institutions across the world. To be Al-Rashidi is to be Islam, in the particular way that some families are so completely identified with a cause that the cause and the family become indistinguishable. I am telling you this so you understand what it means that I am recording this testimony. This is not a story of someone who drifted away from a faith they were loosely connected to. This is a story of someone who was Islam by name, by blood, by fortune, by public identity, choosing something that cost her everything that name and blood and fortune represented. I am 24 years old, and I have paid a price for what I am about to tell you that I hope you never have to pay. And I would pay it again without hesitation. Every single day I would pay it again. Everything began in Mecca. I had been to Mecca before, of course, many times. For a family like mine, Hajj and Umrah are not extraordinary events. They are part of the rhythm of life, performed with all the reverence they deserve, but also with the particular familiarity of people for whom holy places are not distant aspirations but regular destinations. I had stood before the Kaaba more times than I could count. I had prayed and circumambulated and done everything that a devout Muslim woman of my background does in that place. This time was different from the first moment of arrival. I cannot tell you exactly why or how to describe the difference precisely. Something in the atmosphere felt charged, heavier, more significant, as though the air itself was carrying something that ordinary air does not carry. I noticed it and I set it aside because I am a practical person and I do not generally indulge unexplained impressions. Then came the moment at the Kaaba. I was in the midst of the circumambulation, moving with the great circular current of worshippers around the black stone structure that is the most sacred point in the Islamic world. I was praying as I moved in the way I had been taught, focused and devout, and then I saw the light. It was on the Kaaba itself, not a reflection of the lights of the mosque, not a trick of the crowd or the movement or the angle of vision, a light that came from no source I could identify, resting on the surface of the Kaaba with a quality of warmth and presence that was entirely unlike the clean, artificial brightness of the mosque's lighting. I stopped moving. The crowd continued around me, and I stood still in the current of it, and I stared. People around me were noticing it too. I could hear the murmur of reaction, confusion, awe, a few voices saying things I could not make out in the general sound of the enormous crowd. Some people were pointing, some were praying louder, some were simply standing still the way I was standing still. I heard someone near me say quietly, almost to themselves, that it was Jesus, that Jesus was appearing on the Kaaba. I rejected that immediately. The rejection was automatic and complete, not the product of theological reasoning but of identity. I am al-Rashidi. I am from the family that protects Islam. I am in the most sacred place in Islam. Jesus does not appear on the Kaaba. That is not a thing that happens. That is not a thing that could happen. My mind would not hold the idea for more than a fraction of a second before it expelled it. I moved on. I completed my circumambulation. I told myself it was a lighting phenomenon, and I filed it under things I did not need to think about further. But I did not stop seeing it when I closed my eyes, and something had changed in me in that moment that I did not yet have the vocabulary to describe. A door had been nudged, not opened, not yet, just nudged. A question had been planted in soil that had never received that kind of seed before. I was not conscious of it as a question. I was conscious of it only as a vague unease, a slight sense of displacement, the feeling of someone who has been living in a house for 24 years and has suddenly noticed a door they never saw before. I returned home from Mecca and my family saw nothing different in me. Why would they? Outwardly, I was exactly the same. I performed my prayers. I sat at dinner with my father and brothers and spoke about ordinary things. I moved through the rooms of our palace with the ease of someone who has always lived in palaces. Inside, the door was there, and it was waiting. The first dream came on the second night after I returned. I was in a place I could not identify, not Mecca, not Riyadh, not anywhere I recognized. A place that had the quality of somewhere that exists at a level of reality more fundamental than the physical places I know, vivid in a way that sleeping dreams are not vivid, with the full weight of real experience, every sense present and accounted for. A man was standing at a distance, robed in white, completely still. I could not see his face clearly at that distance, but something about his presence reached across the space between us with a warmth that I felt physically, the way you feel sunlight on your face when you step out of a cold building. He did not speak in that first dream. He simply stood there and I stood there, and when I woke up, I was not frightened exactly. I was unsettled in a way that took me a long time to identify, the unsettledness of someone who has encountered something their existing framework has no category for. I told no one. I performed my Fajr prayer, and I pushed the dream away and I went about my day. The second night he was closer. Same place, same figure in white, but closer now. Close enough that I could begin to make out the quality of his face, though not yet its full detail. And this time he spoke. Not words I could fully grasp in the dream, more like a frequency, a resonance, something that carried meaning without yet being assembled into sentences. The meaning was, I am here. I have always been here. Pay attention. I woke up with my heart moving strangely in my chest, not from fear, from something else, something that felt uncomfortably like recognition. I told no one. I performed my prayer and I pushed the dream away and I went about my day. But the day was different. I was watching things, the wealth around me, the luxury, the beauty of the palace and the objects in the life I lived, with a slight doubling of vision, as though I was seeing them clearly, but also seeing through them to something they were not containing, something they had never contained. I had everything a person could want materially, and I had lived for years with a quiet, unnameable dissatisfaction that I had never examined because examining it felt ungrateful, and also because I had no idea what to do with it. The dissatisfaction had a name now, or it was getting one: peace. What I did not have was peace, and something about the figure in the white robe was connected to that word in a way I could not yet articulate. The third night, he was close enough to see his face, and his face undid everything. I want to tell you what his face was, not physically. I am not going to give you a description of features because the features are not what mattered and are not what I remember most. What I remember is the expression on the face of this man standing before me in this dream was the expression of someone who has known you your entire life. Every part of you, the parts you show and the parts you hide, and the parts you have hidden so long you have almost forgotten they exist. Known all of it, and looking at you right now with all of that knowledge and not turning away. I have been looked at my whole life, as a princess, as a daughter of a prominent family, as a woman whose appearance and comportment reflect on her family's reputation. I have been seen and assessed and measured and found appropriate or found wanting. I know what it feels like to be looked at. What I experienced in that dream was not being looked at. It was being known. They are entirely different things, and the difference between them is the difference between standing in front of a mirror and standing in front of someone who loves you, he said. And these were the first clear words, that he was the truth, that he was the light, that no one reaches the Father except through him. I woke up and I sat in the dark of my room for a long time. I was shaking, not from fear, from the impact of something very large making contact with something very small. I was 24 years old and I had spent my entire life inside the most powerful religious tradition in the world, and I was shaking in the dark of my palace bedroom because a man in white had looked at me in a dream and said, he was the truth. I knew who he was. I had known since the second night and had been refusing to finish the knowing. Jesus. The name that belonged to the religion of other people, the name that was spoken in my world only in the context of theological correction. A prophet, yes, honored, yes, but not what Christians claimed, not the Son, not God, not the way. That is what I had been taught. What I had been shown was something different. On the fourth night, I did not sleep for a long time. I lay in my bed with my eyes open and the room around me was quiet and dark, and I was thinking about everything. About the Kaaba and the light, about 3 nights of dreams, about the face that had looked at me with complete knowledge and complete love. I was thinking about my father and my brothers and the weight of the name I carried and what it would mean if what I was experiencing was real. If he was real, I was not asleep when the room changed. That is what I need you to understand about the fourth night. I was awake. I am 24 years old and I know the difference between sleeping and waking. And I was awake, lying in my bed in the dark, when the quality of the darkness in the corner of my room shifted. The light came the same way it had come in the dreams, warm, sourceless, with a depth to it that the word light does not adequately capture. But this time it was not in a dream landscape. It was in my room, in my palace, in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia. The light was in the corner of my bedroom, and it was real, and he was in it. I sat up. I could not speak. I am a woman who has been trained from childhood to carry herself with composure in every situation. I have been in rooms with heads of state and dignitaries and the most powerful people in the world, and I have always known what to do with myself in those rooms. I sat in my bed and I had no idea what to do with myself, and I did not try to figure it out. I just looked at him. He said my name, my full name, in Arabic in a voice that I cannot describe in terms of sound because it operated differently from sound. It did not travel through the air and enter my ears in the normal sequence. It was simply present inside me the moment he spoke, as though the voice and the hearing happened in the same place at the same time. He said, "Nur, I have been looking for you." I found my voice. I said barely, "Who are you?" He said, "You already know who I am. You have known since the first night. I am asking you to stop running from the knowing." Something broke open in my chest when he said that. Because he was right. I had known. I had been knowing for 3 nights and spending every waking hour constructing reasons why the knowing was impossible, and the knowing kept surviving every reason I built against it. He said, "I am the Son, not a prophet, not a teacher in a long line of teachers. The Son, the one who was before the first word of any holy text was written, the one who holds every life in existence, including yours, including your father's, including every person who will be in the room when you are asked to deny me." I said, "How do you know about that room?" He said, "I know every room you will ever stand in. I have walked into every difficult place before you arrived at it. I am not surprised by any of what is coming, and I will be in that room with you when you stand in it." He said, "You have had everything this life provides. You know better than most people that everything this life provides is real and is good and does not produce peace. I am offering you what none of it can give, not comfort, not safety. What is coming will not be comfortable or safe. Peace, the kind that does not depend on your circumstances, the kind that nothing they can do to you in that room can reach." I said, "They will disown me. They will—" I could not finish the sentence. He said, "I know. And I am asking you anyway, not because the cost is small, because what I am giving you is worth the cost. And because you are worth the cost to me, I did not go to a cross for people whose situation was easy. I went for exactly this, for Na, in a palace in Riyadh, 24 years old, sitting in the dark, being asked to choose between everything she was born into and everything that is actually true. He said, "Come to me, receive what I am giving you. And when they ask you to deny me, remember this room, remember my face, remember that I was here, and tell them the truth." Then he said something that has lived in me every moment since. He said, "I am the peace you have been looking for your whole life, not a feeling, not a circumstance, me, and I am not leaving." And then the light faded, and the room was dark again. And I was sitting in my bed in my palace in Riyadh, and the world was completely different from what it had been 4 days ago. And I was different from what I had been 4 days ago. And I sat in that new world, in that new self, until the morning prayer call came. And I got up and I prayed. Not the way I had prayed before, but directed, personal, completely honest, to the face I had seen. I said yes. In the quiet of my room, I said yes. And the peace arrived like something being poured into a container that had been waiting for it a very long time. The door locked behind me and I stood in the center of my room. And I did not cry. I did not pace. I did not fall apart. I stood there and I felt something that made no logical sense given everything that had just happened. I felt him present in that locked room the way he had been present in my bedroom on the 4th night. Not visibly, not dramatically. Just there, steady and warm and completely unbothered by locked doors and family ultimatums and the weight of everything I had just lost. And I understood in that moment that what was coming next, whatever my father and the scholars and the council decided to do, I was not going to face it alone. He had told me he would be in that room. He had been in that room. And he was in this one too. That was enough. That was more than enough. I sat down on the edge of my bed and I waited for what came next with the peace still underneath everything, holding me the way deep water holds a boat, invisibly, completely, from below. The morning they summoned me, I already knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the way the household staff moved, carefully, avoiding my eyes, the particular quietness of people who know something that they are not going to tell you. I had been called to my father's main reception room. Not his private sitting room where family conversations happened. The formal reception room, the one reserved for important gatherings and official matters. I walked down that corridor and I prayed with every step. Not the formal structured prayer of my upbringing, the direct, personal, urgent prayer of someone who had spent several days learning what it meant to speak to Jesus as a living person rather than a theological concept. I said, I need you in that room. You told me you would be there. I need you to be there. I need you to be there. The peace held underneath the fear, underneath the hammering of my heart and the cold in my hands. The peace held. It was the most extraordinary thing that these two things could exist in the same body at the same time. Terror on the surface and something unshakable underneath it. I had never experienced anything like it in 24 years of living inside every material comfort available to a human being. I pushed open the door of the reception room. My father was there, my 3 older brothers, Tariq, Faisal and Hamdan, and arranged around the room in a configuration that told me immediately this had been carefully planned were 8 men I recognized as Islamic scholars and elders of significant standing. Some of them I had met at family gatherings over the years. Men of white robes and long beards, and the particular gravity of people who have spent their lives being deferred to. My father did not greet me. He looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face directed at me before. Not anger exactly, something more like the expression of a man who is managing something that is causing him pain by converting the pain into formality. He said, "Sit down, Nur." I sat. He said, without further preamble, that it had been reported to him that I had been heard on more than one occasion speaking the name of Jesus in a manner that suggested personal address, that one of the household staff had heard me speaking in my sleep and had reported it out of concern, that this combined with my behavior since returning from Mecca had raised questions that needed to be answered directly and immediately. He said, "I want you to tell me in front of these men that what has been reported is a misunderstanding, that you are well, that your faith is intact." The room waited. I looked at my father. I looked at my brothers. I looked at the scholars arranged around the room with their expressions of grief patience. And I felt the pressure of that room the way you feel the pressure of deep water, coming from every direction simultaneously, enormous, designed by its very nature to push you back to the surface, where things are ordinary and manageable, and where Saudi princesses do not have conversations with Jesus in their palace bedrooms. I opened my mouth to give my father what he was asking for. The words were almost already formed, the reassuring, deflecting, face-saving words that would have ended the gathering and sent everyone home and bought me time to figure out what came next. And then something came alive in me. I cannot describe it any other way. Something that had been quiet became not quiet. Something that had been waiting became done waiting. And what came out of my mouth was not the reassuring words I had almost said. I said, "I cannot tell you that, because it is not true." The room changed immediately. My father's expression shifted. One of the scholars made a sound. My brother Tariq leaned forward. I did not stop. I said, "I went to Mecca and I saw a light on the Kaaba that I could not explain. I came home and for 3 nights I had dreams of a man in white who came closer each night until I could see his face. On the 4th night I was awake, fully awake, in my room, in this house, and he was there. Present, real, more real than anything I have experienced in 24 years. I said, "He told me who he is. He is Jesus, not the Jesus of theological argument, not the Jesus of Christian versus Muslim debate, the actual person, the Son of God." And he spoke to me specifically about my life, about the peace I have never had, about what is true. I said, "I have had everything this family's name and wealth can provide. I have had more than most people will ever see in their lifetime, and I have never had peace, not one day of it, not until he came." I said, "Since he came, I have peace, real peace, the kind that is still present in this room right now, while I am sitting in front of all of you, while I am terrified, while I know what I am risking by saying what I am saying. It is here, it does not leave. He promised me it would not leave, and it has not." My father said in a voice that was very controlled, "Nar, stop speaking." I said, "I cannot stop." He told me to tell the truth in this room, and I am telling it. My brother Faisal said something sharp and angry. One of the scholars began speaking in the measured tones of a man delivering a theological correction. I heard the words, stress, delusion, the tricks that the enemy plays on the faithful, the importance of seeking proper Islamic guidance for spiritual disturbance. I let them speak. I sat quietly, and I let them speak, and I felt the peace underneath everything, steady and unmoved. And when they had finished, I said, I understand what you are telling me. I have heard it, and I am telling you what I experienced and what I know to be true. He is real. He appeared to me, and I believe in him. My father stood up. He was a tall man, imposing in the way of men who have spent their lives in positions of authority. He stood and he looked at me and he said words that I will carry in my body for the rest of my life, not because they broke me, but because they did not. He said, deny this man you are calling Jesus. Do it now, in front of these witnesses, or you are no longer my daughter. The room was completely silent. I looked at my father. I looked at the face of the man who had raised me, who had given me everything, whose name I had carried for 24 years as the primary definition of who I was. I looked at him and I felt grief of what was happening alongside the peace that the grief could not displace. Both things real, both things present, not cancelling each other out, but existing together in the particular complexity of a moment that costs everything and is worth everything at the same time. I said, I cannot deny him. I will not deny him. He is real and he found me, and what he gave me is the truest thing I have ever had. I am sorry, Baba. I love you, and I cannot deny him. My father turned away from me. Tariq and Hamdan came to my sides immediately, not violently. There was too large an audience for violence in that moment. But firmly, with the grip of people who have been told what to do and are doing it. I was lifted from my chair and taken from the reception room and walked down the corridor of my own home like a prisoner and taken to my room, and the door was locked behind me. The days that followed were the strangest days of my life. Strange because they were simultaneously the most confined and the most free I have ever been, confined in every physical sense. I was locked in my room, my phone was taken, my meals were brought to me by staff who did not look at me and did not speak to me beyond the necessary minimum. I could not leave. I could not communicate with anyone outside those walls. I was a 24-year-old woman locked in a palace bedroom, and the palace had become a prison. And yet, he was there, in the room with me, not in the visible dramatic way of the fourth night. I did not see the light again in that period, but present in the way that I had come to recognize as his particular presence. The warmth, the steadiness, the sense of being accompanied that is entirely different from the feeling of being alone. I was not alone in that room for a single moment of those days. I knew it as surely as I knew the walls around me. I prayed constantly. I had no Bible. I had been curious about the Bible in the days since my encounter and had carefully searched on my phone before it was taken, reading fragments that I had found and that had illuminated what he had told me. But I had no physical text. What I had was memory and conversation, speaking to him directly, telling him my fears, asking him questions, sitting in silence when the silence felt like the right response. I thought about my mother who had died when I was 11 and whom I had missed every day since. I thought about her and I thought he knew her name too. He told me he knew every life, and something about that thought was unexpectedly comforting in a way I had not anticipated. On what I calculated to be the 5th day of my confinement, the door opened and Tariq came in alone, my eldest brother, a man of 32 who had always been the most serious of my siblings, the one most completely shaped by my father's expectations and most committed to fulfilling them. He sat down across from me and he looked at me for a long time before speaking. He said, "You have caused a crisis in this family that you do not fully understand the scale of." I said, "I understand more of the scale than you think." He said, "Father is devastated, not angry, devastated. Do you understand the difference?" I said, "Yes, and I am sorry for his pain. I am genuinely sorry for his pain." but I cannot be sorry for what I experienced, and I cannot deny what is true. Tariq said, what you experienced was not real, Noor. You are an intelligent woman. You went to Mecca. You were in an emotionally heightened state. You came home and your mind produced experiences that felt real because your mind is powerful enough to produce convincing unrealities. This is a known phenomenon. The scholars will explain it to you. I looked at my brother and I felt something for him that surprised me, a deep compassion that I do not think I had always felt for Tariq, who had often been stern and distant with me. I felt compassion because he was doing his best with the framework he had. He was being reasonable within his understanding. He simply did not have a category for what I was describing because he had not experienced it. I said, Tariq, I was awake. I was not in an elevated emotional state. I was lying in my bed in the dark thinking practical thoughts, and the room changed. I know the difference between my own imagination and what entered that room. I have 24 years of experience with my own imagination. This was not that. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, they are going to bring you before the council tomorrow. The scholars, they are going to give you the opportunity to recant formally and restore yourself to the family. Father has agreed that if you recant before the council, the matter will be treated as a private health issue and not taken further. I said, and if I do not recant? He did not answer that question directly. The way he did not answer it told me everything about what the answer was. He stood up to leave. At the door he turned and said with a quietness that I think was the closest Tariq knows how to come to tenderness, Please, Noor, think about what you are doing. Think about what you are throwing away. I said, I have thought about it every moment since it happened. And what I found is worth more than what I am throwing away. I wish I could make you understand that. He left. The door locked again. I sat in the quiet of my room and I talked to Jesus about my brother. I asked him to find Tariq the way he found me. I am still asking that every day. The council gathering the next day was larger than the first. More scholars, more elders, men who had traveled specifically for this. I understood from the scale of it that my situation had become something beyond a family matter. When a daughter of al-Rashidi stands in front of witnesses and proclaims Jesus, it becomes a matter of religious and political significance that extends well beyond the palace walls. They were not unkind to me in that room. I want to be accurate about this because I think it is important. They were not cruel, they were not threatening, they were not the cartoon villains that a story like this might be tempted to produce. They were men who believed completely in what they believed and who were genuinely trying within their framework to help me. They explained to me carefully and thoroughly the Islamic understanding of Jesus. They explained the theological reasons why what I had experienced could not be what I claimed it was. They brought in a doctor, a psychiatrist, who spoke to me gently about the neurological basis of vivid dream experiences and the psychological impact of spiritually charged environments like Mecca on susceptible individuals. I listened to all of it. I listened with genuine attention because these were not foolish people and their arguments were not foolish arguments. They were the best arguments available within a framework that did not include the possibility of Jesus appearing to a Saudi princess in her palace bedroom. When they finished, I sat for a moment in the silence they had created. Then I stood up. I had not planned to stand. I simply found myself standing, the way you find yourself doing something that a force larger than your own decision-making has initiated. I said, I have heard everything you have said. I have understood it. And I want to tell you something. I came into this room prepared to be persuaded. I wanted to be persuaded. Do you understand how much easier my life would be if you had persuaded me? I have spent these days in my room hoping that something you said would give me a reason to doubt what I experienced. I said, nothing you have said has given me that reason, because what you are offering me is an explanation for an experience you have decided in advance cannot be what it is. You have not explained away my experience. You have explained why it should not have happened. But it did happen, and the peace that came with it is still here right now in this room, and it was not produced by anything any of you can account for. I said, I believe in Jesus. I believe he is the Son of God. I believe he appeared to me because he is real and he is present, and he finds people in the most unexpected places. I cannot stand in front of you and say otherwise, not because I am being stubborn, because it is true. The head of the council looked at me for a long moment, then he looked at my father. My father stood. He walked to the center of the room. He stood in front of me. His daughter, his youngest child, the one who had her mother's eyes, and he said formally in front of every witness in that room that I was no longer his daughter, that I was cut off from the family, that my name would be removed from every family record and document, that I was dead to him. I looked at my father and I said, I love you. I will pray for you every day for the rest of my life. He turned away. They took me that evening to a location I did not recognize, a house somewhere in Riyadh. I could not tell which district. They had covered my eyes during the journey. A plain room, a locked door, staff who brought food and said nothing, a window that showed me only a walled courtyard and a rectangle of sky. I understood what this place was. I was not naive about the implications of where I had arrived. Women who leave Islam in Saudi Arabia, particularly women of prominent families whose conversion represents a public relations crisis for Islamic institutions, do not always leave such places. I knew this. I sat in that plain room and I knew this, and I talked to Jesus about it with the directness of someone who has nothing left to lose and therefore nothing to hide in prayer. I said, I am not afraid to die for you, but I would prefer not to. I would prefer to live and tell people what you showed me. I would prefer to find a Bible and read it. I would prefer to find other people who know you and learn what it means to follow you properly. If there is a way out of this room that does not require me to deny you, I am asking for it. I stayed in that room for several days. I counted them by the meals, 3 per day, regular enough that I could track time by them. I prayed, I slept, I thought, I waited. On what I calculated to be the 4th or 5th day, something happened that I had not anticipated and that I now understand was the most significant evidence, beyond even the visions and the appearance, that Jesus was actively at work in Saudi Arabia in ways that went far beyond my personal situation. The door opened in the early hours of the morning, not a regular mealtime. A man I had never seen before came in. He was wearing the clothes of household staff. He spoke in a low and urgent voice. He told me I had very little time and I needed to come with him immediately. I said, Who are you? He said, Someone who knows who you saw in Mecca, someone who saw the same thing. I looked at this man in the near dark of that room, and something in me, the peace, the steady, unmistakable presence that had not left me since the 4th night, told me to trust him, not naively, not without awareness that I was making a significant decision based on limited information, but with a particular certainty that I had come to associate with the moments when Jesus was directing something rather than me managing it myself. I stood up. I followed him. What I learned in the hours and days that followed reshaped my understanding of what was happening in Saudi Arabia in ways I am still processing. The man who came for me was not alone. He was part of a small and extraordinarily careful network of people. Some of them members of the Islamic scholarly establishment, some of them government adjacent, some of them household staff in the homes of prominent families who had all had encounters with Jesus. Some at Mecca during the event that I had witnessed, some in dreams before and after, some through other means I did not ask about in detail because there was not time for detailed conversations during a carefully planned escape operation. They were secret believers, operating inside the heart of the Saudi Islamic establishment, carrying their faith the way people carry things that are precious and dangerous simultaneously, with enormous care, in hidden places, never exposed to the wrong light. They had known about me. They had been watching my situation from a distance through the connections available to people embedded in the structures I was embedded in, and they had decided, at significant personal risk, that they were not going to let what happened to me be the ending of my story. They moved me 3 times in 2 days. Safe house to safe house, each one the home of someone in the network, each handoff carefully timed and executed with the particular precision of people who understood that what they were doing, if discovered, would cost them everything I had already lost and possibly more. On the 3rd day, I was in a vehicle moving toward a border. I will not tell you which border or by which route. What I will tell you is that I crossed it, and that on the other side, waiting with a contact the network had arranged, was the beginning of what comes next. I am in Jordan now. Amman, a city of noise and hills and a population that contains within it, if you know where to look, a community of believers that has received me with a warmth and a completeness that I did not know how to receive at first, because I had never been received that way before, not for who I was rather, than what my family name represented. I found a church within 2 weeks of arriving, a small congregation, modest building, nothing like the grand mosques I grew up moving through. I sat in the back on the first Sunday and I watched people worship Jesus openly and without fear, and I cried for the entire service, not from sadness, from the overwhelming reality of being in a room full of people who knew the person I had met in my palace bedroom and were not ashamed of him and were not hiding him and were not paying any price for loving him except the ordinary price of living faithfully in an ordinary world. The pastor came to speak to me afterward, a gentleman who asked me nothing about my background and simply said, "You are welcome here. Come as often as you want. I have been every Sunday since. I am learning. I am reading the Bible for the first time in a complete and sustained way, and every page is either illuminating something he told me or introducing me to dimensions of who he is that I had not yet encountered. I am learning what it means to pray as a follower rather than as someone finding her way in the dark. I am learning what community means, the particular gift of being known by people who share your faith and can speak to your experience with the authority of their own. I think about my father every day. I think about Tariq and Faisal and Hamdan. I think about the palace and the private aircraft and the life that was, by every material measure, extraordinary. I think about all of it, and I feel the grief of it genuinely. It is real loss, and I do not pretend otherwise. But the grief sits inside the peace rather than displacing it. That is the miracle that I live in daily, that the peace is not the absence of pain. It is something that coexists with pain and is not diminished by it. He told me he was not going to leave. He has not left. There are things I need to say before I close. To my father, I know you will not hear this testimony, and I know that even if you did, it would not reach you in the way I would want it to reach you. But I am saying it anyway because it is true. I love you. I have loved you my whole life, and the courage to stand in that room and refuse to deny Jesus came partly from watching you stand for what you believed your whole life. You taught me by example that some things are worth the cost of standing for them. I was standing for something different than what you stood for, but the willingness to stand that I learned from you. I pray for you every morning and every night. I pray that what found me finds you. I pray that in the middle of whatever you are feeling about what happened, the anger, the grief, the public embarrassment of a daughter who chose Jesus in a room full of witnesses, I pray that in the middle of all of it he finds you the way he found me, in the dark, unexpectedly, with complete knowledge and complete love. To the secret believers in Saudi Arabia, the ones in the network who risked everything to get me out, and the ones beyond that network who are carrying their faith in hidden places inside the structures of the most powerful Islamic state in the world. I see you. Jesus sees you. What you did for me at personal risk I cannot repay, except by telling the truth publicly about what is happening privately. The light that appeared in Mecca was real. The encounters people are having are real. You are not alone, and you are not imagining things, and the one you are following knows exactly where you are. To Muslim women, particularly those in the Gulf, particularly those who have everything the world can provide and have discovered that everything the world can provide does not produce peace. I want to speak to you specifically. I was you. I had the private aircraft and the palace and the clothes and the jewelry and the status and the family name and the complete material security that most people only dream about, and I was empty in a way that none of it could fill. Jesus fills it. Not metaphorically. Actually, the peace he promised me is the most real thing I have ever experienced, and it arrived the moment I said yes to him, and it has not left. He is looking for you. He is already in the process of finding you. The dreams you are having that you are not telling anyone about, he is in those dreams. Pay attention to the church around the world. Pray for Saudi Arabia. Pray for the Arabian Peninsula. Pray for the people inside the most powerful Islamic institutions in the world who are having encounters with Jesus that they cannot share with anyone in their immediate environment. Pray for the network of secret believers who are operating at extraordinary personal risk to shepherd the ones who are finding Jesus in that region. Pray for them by name even though you do not know their names. He knows their names and your prayers will find them. And pray for me. I am 24 years old and I am in Amman and I am starting a life that I have no map for. I am learning what it means to be a follower of Jesus without a family around me and without the identity structure that my family name provided for my entire previous life. I am learning who Noor is when she is not al-Rashidi. It is the most interesting and the most difficult thing I have ever done, and I am doing it with the peace that does not leave, and the pleasance that does not withdraw, and the certainty that he who began what he began in my palace bedroom is faithful enough to complete it. His name is Jesus. He appeared on the Kaaba in Mecca, and he appeared in my bedroom in Riyadh. And he is appearing to people across the Muslim world in numbers and in ways that the structures of Islamic power cannot prevent, because he does not need permission to enter the rooms he chooses to enter. He entered mine. And I will spend the rest of whatever life I have been given making sure the world knows it.